Ohio State knew they needed to use a portal to go find a starting center for next season, and Jake Diebler believes he found that in Kentucky transfer Andrija Jelavic.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Jay Stephens, and during today's show, we'll be joined by Lance Dawe of Locked On Kentucky to break down one of the Buckeyes transfers in this current cycle in Andrija Jelavic and discuss what the Buckeyes are getting in the talented big man and maybe some areas that he is a little bit weak on the basketball court. And joining us for the entirety of this show, this bonus pod, is Lance Dawe of Locked On Kentucky. I almost said Locked On Wildcats, but I realized there's Wildcats in Arizona, and I didn't want to say the wrong Wildcat because I know how Kentucky fans are. If I say the wrong thing, they'll jump down my throat and they'll be a little upset. But Lance, glad to have you here and talk about a player that I see talent with him, and I understand why Ohio State went out there to bring the former Kentucky Wildcat to Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, this is a guy who Kentucky picked up overseas last season. I believe late in the cycle, actually, to play power forward for the Wildcats. Really, really talented kid. I think you saw that whenever you saw him play in Croatia. The skill set is there as a stretch four, possibly sliding down to the five. He played the five at times for Kentucky last season. I really like what this kid brings to the table just in terms of offensive versatility. In terms of overall scoring threat, I don't necessarily think we saw the staff fully flesh out what he was capable of in year one. It was actually kind of weird, Jay, because the first few games of the season, you got to see Yelovich, and then all of a sudden, for a large swath of the non-conference slate and the beginning of SEC play, Andrija Jelavic, it was like he wasn't there for some reason. Pope just wasn't playing him. And then all of a sudden, he decided early on in the SEC schedule, okay, we'll actually start this guy and we'll actually play him and we'll use him in different ways. And he proved to be pretty valuable for his role. So I think that with time, with an off season to actually develop with the Buckeyes, with more opportunities given to him in practice and actual touches and reps, I could definitely see somebody like Yelovich blossoming into a legitimate player. But the thing that was frustrating to me about Yeli is during his time at Kentucky, I saw the talent. We saw the ability to kind of take his offensive game to the next level at times, and he just didn't get to fully realize it because the staff just, for some reason, literally inexplicably just went away from him.
Why do you think they went away from him?
I think that Mark Pope, with the way that the season was unfolding, was grasping at straws. He was looking for answers. He was trying to find the rotations that worked. And I think that one of the poor decisions he made early was just discarding a couple of players completely out of the rotation, most notably Yelovich. So I think it was less about Yeli and his ability. Maybe he was frustrated with Yeli. There were reports that Pope was had a couple of players in the doghouse just because of how they were performing off the court. I don't think that was Yelovich's problem, but I really do think it was more of a Mark Pope panic issue than an Andrija Jelavic underperforming issue. Because again, like I mentioned, when he played and he got touches in his role, he was super efficient. Now, down the road, his three-point shooting started to kind of fall off a little bit. I think he's a much better three-point shooter than what his stats actually indicate. But it was definitely a Kentucky problem. I don't think it was an Andrija Jelavic issue at all.
So Ohio State's going to bring him in, and my guess is they're going to use him primarily at the 5, not the 4. They have a 5-star kid coming in who's a McDonald's All-American, and Anthony Thompson is going to be your starting 3. 4 will be Amare Bynum. 5 will probably be Yelovich. And I think it's probably, I guess, where they're going to use him. But you said he's probably better at a stretch 4, not a stretch 5. Why do you think that would be the case with him?
I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, that's just where Kentucky used him. That's just where I've seen him. Now, did they have different rotations where they put Yelovich at the 5? Yes. And was he serviceable? Was he good? Yeah. I mean, I think that for a lot of programs, Kentucky included, that would be a legitimate option. It's not like, we're playing small ball with Andrija Jelavic at the 5. The other reason I would argue that Yelovich is a better 4 than a 5 is because he's only 225 pounds. But again, I think that's fine. I think a 6'11", 225 guy that can spray it from 3, if that's the type ball you want to play. He's also not a bad defender. He's not a bad rim protector. I'd play him at the 5 if that's the way I wanted to construct my offense. So the only reason I say that is because I just saw him primarily play that stretch 4 position at Kentucky, and he again, to go back to kind of the way that the season unfolded, initially was not the starter for the Wildcats. He was a backup four behind Mohamed Diabate. And then Diabate, who just simply did not have any sort of offensive versatility to his game. He sort of got regulated to the bench, if that's the right word to use there. And then Yelovich, who can stretch out beyond the three-point line, who has a more consistent post-up move to go to. He was then inserted into the starting lineup and became a more effective player. So Yelovich, just because I've seen him work at that spot, that's what I would project. But I think that the 5 is definitely not out of the question, especially if that's how Ohio State wants to work their way down from the wing at the 3 with Thompson all the way down to Yelovich at the 5. I think it'll work.
What part of the court do you think he's the most effective when he's playing when the Buckeyes said, well, when the Kentucky was on offense? Maybe the words will flow a little bit better here coming up because that was pretty bad. Do you think he's better on offense in the paint, in the mid-range, or from downtown?
I would argue that Yelovich is at his best whenever he is knocking down shots from the perimeter. There were a number of, and I didn't talk about this enough actually as the season wound down, and I should have emphasized it more. There were a number of wide open threes that Andrija Jelavic got towards the end of the season for Kentucky in some really crucial moments, and he just could not knock them down. Whereas earlier in the season, he was consistently hitting at least 1 of 3, 1 of 2 a game, and then he got more volume as the season rolled on. And these, again, Jay, were wide open looks. I think he is a complete offensive player, and he is an extremely valuable one if he's hitting 34, 35, 36% of his threes. And I really do think he's capable of that. It's just developing that outside shot, just getting more reps, getting more game time, because again, this staff, I think, really underprepared him for those moments late in the season. And whenever it actually did come time to shine, Yelovich couldn't execute. And I think part of that was the staff's fault. So he is going to be at his best as a 5 for Ohio State if he can step out beyond the three-point line and be a serviceable to efficient three-point shooter, because that will open up a lot of things for the Buckeyes. I'll also mention this, Jay. Something that was said about Yelovich coming into the season is one of the jokes that Pope made in the offseason is that he was telling him not to dribble because he wanted him to be that spot up, catch and shoot 4 type guy. And then as the season rolled along, come to find out, Andrija Jelavic can put the ball on the floor a little bit, and he has some post moves to go to. So I think that while, yes, the three-point shot is really important, I'd like to see this Ohio State staff develop his post game as well, because I think it's definitely there. He doesn't lack any sort of serious physicality around the rim. I think you could really unlock something there as well.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open when the pressure's on and you need the right hire. This is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. It tracks all your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. And you can set budgets, get alerts, and stay on top of upcoming bills. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join the fun at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. What were your thoughts when he entered the portal?
My thoughts when he entered the portal, as far as just the reaction to it initially, it was expected that Kentucky was going to clean house. We didn't necessarily know who those players were going to be. I think there were a few players that entered before Yelovich, so it kind of gave me a little bit of hope that he could come back. But, and you and I were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on here, I was indifferent about Yelovich entering the portal, and it has less to do with what he is as a talent and more to do about his fit on next year's team, and even more so to do with what can the staff do to develop him to take him to the next level past where he's at right now, because it's very clear he's got talent. He's got the tools. I just don't necessarily know if I trust this staff to really flesh that out, because next year's roster, would Andrija Jelavic still be a starting four? Would he get as many minutes as he did late in the season? Would he be able to kind of experience the growth that he needs to in order to take that next step as a college basketball player? So that was my reaction whenever he entered the portal, is like, I would hate to lose him if he does blossom into a more legitimate offensive threat, a more well-rounded one. But again, that's not necessarily his fault. I think it mostly has to do with I just don't know if I trust Pope to get this guy to where he needs to go.
How well does he protect the rim?
I wouldn't necessarily say he's like a world-beating rim protector. I mean, if you want to go look at Evan Mia, I mean, he's B- in blocks, 76th percentile there. In terms of just defensive Bayesian performance rating, is actually an A-, which is 95th percentile. He's got a solid defensive court impact. His defensive rating is good relative to the rest of the players on Kentucky's roster, frankly. So I would say that there's upside there. I would just want to see him, especially if he's going to play the 5 at Ohio State primarily. I'd like to see more reps to confirm whether or not, okay, this guy can actually do so. But the numbers and just the little bit of tape that we have say, yeah, I don't think he'd be bad. I don't. At the very least, I think he would be average, and there's definitely upside to grow there. And I think the advanced analytics would also argue that.
Well, not only that, I would like to see him gain some weight. Like if he put on 10 to 15 pounds, so where he's not losing his quickness, his foot speed is the same, his jump shot, you don't have to like change the form of his shot to keep all that stuff similar. I think adding 10 to 15 pounds to his frame will drastically help him become a better basketball player, especially in the Big Ten. I mean, we just watched numerous teams in the Big Ten make deep tournament runs, and all of them have really strong, solid big men. And so going from the SEC to the Big Ten, it's a different brand of basketball for the big man, but adding 10 to 15 pounds of good weight will drastically help him be a better basketball player. Would you say it? You saw him play. You covered the man. Do you think adding 10 to 15 pounds on his frame would be a massive benefit from what you've seen?
If he's going to play the 5 at Ohio State, I would almost argue that it's a need. I would almost argue that it's a priority to make sure that he gets this offseason, number one, into the best physical shape of his life, but more so importantly, adding some muscle to that frame if he's going to be that 5 for Ohio State. Because again, let's say he does. Let's say he gets up to 235, 240, maybe somehow, some way he gets up to 235, 240. That's a really, really good player. If he can maintain the efficiency he had inside the arc, he can maybe step out beyond the three-point line, hit at least 33, 34% of his threes. I mean, that's a really, really, really solid center for the Buckeyes. And if they've got shooters around him, if they've got pieces around him, the spacing, I think it's just going to open up for this kid. So, yeah, I would argue if he's going to play center, he needs to gain weight 100%.
What are your last thoughts about Yelovich, the basketball player?
I think that he has tremendous upside. I would question it, not just for Ohio State, not just for Kentucky, but anybody out there. Can you really unlock this kid's skill set? Like, what can you do to open him up, get him more touches, and it not harm the rest of the offense? Because as we see it right now, he's a 27% three-point shooter. I mean, you kind of have to take a little bit of a gamble here by allowing him to take some more shots, allowing him to grow, allowing him to make some mistakes. But a lot of that, I guess, could be found in the offseason here. So I think a lot of upside, really excited about this kid's future. Hate that he left BBN if he does end up becoming a star, but I wish him the best for sure.
He is Lance Dawe, the host of Locked On Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats. You've topped on Locked On Wildcats. You might not be going to Lance's show. You might go somewhere else, but does a great job covering Kentucky. It's one of the rare shows on college that it's probably more basketball than football. And so if you want some basketball in April and May and you want some Midwest variety, go there to Locked On Kentucky and tap into the show. You can follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. Follow him on the same platform at Lance Dawe _. This has been Locked On Buckeyes on a Friday afternoon. Enjoy the weekend. And as always, go to the shoe and watch the spring game tomorrow.